In September 2025, over 84,000 homes were pulled off the market, delisted across the entire United States. And that's a 28% jump over September last year. And this represents the largest September delisting numbers in the last 8 years, according to Redfin. Now, I first reported on this back in July, where for every home listed in my local market, 7 homes were being delisted. It was a big deal. And at the time, I had 2 big questions. 1, how many of these homes will eventually be relisted? And 2, of the homes that are relisted, how many of them will sell? Now, I've got the answers to those questions for you in today's video, but I also have a bigger picture for you that points to why home prices are technically rising even though we are going into a housing correction. And furthermore, even though home prices are rising, are they really? Are you really seeing an increase in real estate value when you take inflation-adjusted returns into account? All that for you in this video, so stick with me. Let's get right into it. All right, so let's dig into this delisting surge. What does it really mean? Like I said, in September, we had 84,000 listings pulled off the market. That's a 28% jump from last year. Now, as a percentage of total listings in the country, that puts delistings at 5.5%, their largest amount in over 8 years. Now, when we look at what homes are delisting, one of the things we can point to is the days on market. So of the homes that were delisted, most of them were on the market 100 days or longer. Now, 100 days is not some magic number that once it hits 100 days, people are going to pull the listing. We're going to talk about why people are pulling these listings in a little bit. But 100 days is a good benchmark to say once a listing is over 100 days, it is at risk of being delisted. And it is that amount of time that represents the seller's discomfort threshold, if you will. At about 100 days, it seems sellers who are not truly committed to moving this property get a little frustrated and take their ball and go home. Now, why is this even more of an issue? Well, right now, 70% of listings nationwide qualify as stale listings. A stale listing is 60 days on market or more without an offer. The jump from 60 days to 100 isn't that big. So with 70% of listings at 60 days and counting on their way to that 100 mark, which we know at least psychologically is the point at which some sellers start to think about bouncing out and taking their property off the market, especially right now as we enter the holidays. If they're really not committed to selling, they don't want to have people coming through the house over the Christmas holidays. So over the next 30 to 40 days, towards the end of the year here and into the beginning of January, we could see this delisting trend jump up even more as that 70% of stale listings hit that 100-day mark or beyond. Now, we'll have to see the data in the rears to see if that 100 days continues to stand up, but my guess is we're going to see that number continue to stand up, and we're going to see the number of delistings continue to surge because of some other market mechanics that we'll get into in just a moment. All right, so at the top of the video, I told you we were going to answer 2 critical questions we had when we first reported on the delisting trend back in July. Those 2 questions were, of the homes that are delisted, how many of them will eventually make their way back to the marketplace? And of the ones that do make their way back to the marketplace, how many of them will actually sell? So how many of those sellers got realistic enough to put a price on that home enough to get it to move? And the answer to both those questions is, unfortunately, not that many. From the homes that were delisted in June, only 18% came back to the market. The homes that were delisted in July, only 20% of them eventually came back to the market. And of that 20% that came back to the market of the delisted homes, so the vast majority of them, 80% stayed off the market, but of the 20% that came back, only 31.6% of those eventually went on to sell by now in December of 2025. So that is a significantly low number of the delisted homes that ever made their way back, and even less of those that ever sold. The vast majority of the homes that were delisted stayed delisted, or when they came back to the market, didn't eventually sell, meaning that seller never really got realistic enough about price to move that property. So the delisting trend, one of our questions about it was, is it really persistent? Are they going off, then getting realistic, coming back on and selling? In which case the delisting trend would be no real big deal, just some local temporal fluctuations in the market, but over the course of a year, it all would wash out and work out to be kind of a moot point. Unfortunately, that's not the case. What's really happening is the vast majority of the homes that are delisting are staying delisting, and even of the small minority of homes that come back to the market, even less of those are actually eventually going on to sell. So this delisting trend is having essentially a permanent effect of lowering the overall inventory for sale across the nation. And this is a big deal, and it plays right into the reasons that people choose to delist, which we're going to go over in the next section. Have you made it this far? Are you getting anything at all out of this video? Hit the like button, click subscribe, and hit that little bell icon so you don't miss another video with crucial information to help you make the highest quality real estate decisions you can from the comfort of your couch. All right, let's jump right back into our discussion of this delisting trend so you can make sense of it for yourself. So let's dive deeper into what's going on here behaviorally. Why are people pulling their listings from the market? What's causing all of this? And we have three major factors. We have persistent weakness in the buyer pool, just lower buyer demand. We have persistent high interest rates for the buyers, which is causing that weaker demand. And we have the lock-in effect from pandemic era interest rates. So let's take them one by one. Weak buyer demand. We are just seeing less buyers entering the market. Now, we'll get into the interest rate reasons behind that in a minute, but the main reason, even bigger and stronger than the interest rates, I would posit, is fear, uncertainty, and doubt, FUD. That's what's really driving buyers back onto the fence and creating low buyer demand in the marketplace. People are worried about their jobs. People are worried about the economy. People are worried about us plunging into a recession. People are worried about us plunging into a recession with persistently high interest rates going into what could be a contentious election year in 2026. We don't cover politics here, we cover economics, but our political cycles do have an effect both on people psychologically and on our economy. So as we go into 2026 and the end here, the last month of 2025, we have a lot of reasons that people are nervous about losing their jobs, nervous about the persistent inflation and how much everything is costing them and things costing them more. And a lot of people are choosing to keep their powder dry and wait for a rainy day here because they feel like a rainy day is coming. Earlier this year, Redfin noted that 1 in 4 Americans are saying they were pumping the brakes on major purchases like cars and houses. And I bet you that number is even bigger right now because frankly, things haven't gotten much better towards the end of the year from an economic stability perspective in the United States. So this first reason, the weakened buyer demand and due to the fear, uncertainty, and doubt is causing a lot of sellers to face a market where they're not getting offers quickly. They're not getting multiple offers, and they're certainly not getting offers at their listing price or above like they were hoping. And so the seller's expectations are not being met in the marketplace. Now, if you combine that with a seller who doesn't have a necessary motivation to sell, if this is not a liquidating somebody's estate after death or a divorce sale or a relocation for a job, if it's not some kind of forced sale and they don't have a real strong motivation to sell, all of these other things causing the buyers not to come out and meet their expectations is causing a lot of sellers to think about pulling their home from the market and calling it quits, at least for now. All right, before we jump into reason number 2, sellers are delisting their homes, you might be wondering who I am and why you should be listening to me about real estate or anything at all, really, and that's a pretty fair question. My name is Rich Curtis with eXp Realty, and I've been selling homes for over 20 years now in markets ranging from the Great Recession to the COVID market insanity and everything in between. So when it comes to real estate, I've got you covered. Now let's jump right back into our discussion of this delisting trend so you can understand what's going on out there in the market. Reason number 2 sellers are delisting their properties is because of persistently high interest rates. Now, this doesn't affect them, of course, directly. They're not sitting there looking at the interest rates and saying, I'm pulling my home from the market. But the persistently high interest rates are another factor in keeping the buyer demand low. And they watch the news and they see that the interest rates aren't coming down. In fact, even as the Fed has started to drop the federal funds rate, we're not seeing big drops in the mortgage interest rates. And so sellers who aren't particularly motivated, don't have a real have-to reason for sale, are seeing the buyers not coming out and they're saying to themselves, the interest rates aren't coming down. We're not going to see more buyers come to the buyer pool. And I don't want to keep going through this process of having my home on the market because let's face it, it's no fun selling a house, having your home on the market, having to keep it clean and showing ready all the time, having people calling at all hours of the day wanting to come and show the house and have access to the house and having to clear yourself and your kids and your dogs out to give the home over to people so that they can do a showing, only to find out that the vast majority of them come up with some reason not to buy the house because as buyers, they are greatly affected by all that fear, uncertainty, and doubt. So it has to be the absolute perfect home for buyers to jump right now. And the sellers go through that whole emotional roller coaster over those first 100 days, They watch the news, they see the interest rates aren't coming down, and they decide to pull the listing. So although it isn't a direct impact on the sellers, you think, oh, interest rates, that's really a buyer problem. It's creating a large problem for the sellers. But our next one is a direct interest rate impact on the sellers. So let's talk about that. Now, this third reason that sellers are delisting their homes is because of the lock-in effect. That is the fact that a vast majority of these sellers are sitting on a 3% or even less than 3% pandemic-era interest rate and a very low mortgage payment because of it. They are watching the interest rate stay persistently high, and in this case, it is affecting them directly because if they were to sell this home, their replacement home that they purchased would be subject to the new interest rates, which are double or more than the interest rate they have now, creating much higher payments and a disincentive to move. So again, if sellers don't have a have-to situation to move and they bring their property to market with their sort of pandemic era pricing expectations and they find that the buyers aren't coming out in droves anymore, they're not writing them 4 and 5 offers, giving them $100,000 more than they're asking and waiving all their contingencies up front and all the insanity that people got used to, unfortunately, during the pandemic real estate insanity, which all set very unrealistic expectations. When none of that is happening, these folks are saying, you know what? I've got my 3% interest rate. I've got my really low mortgage payment. I don't have to move. Forget it. I'm going to take my ball and go home. I'm going to delist this house. And especially going into the Christmas holidays here, I'm going to pull it and I'm going to sit on it for a while. And we'll think about this in a couple of months or next spring. So that lock-in effect is something that is once in a lifetime. I've been doing this for 21 years now, and this is the first time we've ever faced something like this where we have a seller side of the market that has a pretty significant disincentive to sell their homes. And this creates a real supply problem, a lack of supply in the real estate market, which exacerbates the number one affordability problem we have. So let's jump into now affordability, why prices are still going up, even though we are going into a housing market correction, and how all this shakes out for you as a buyer or seller in the marketplace. So let's talk about the elephant in the room, the big problem in the real estate industry, the whole cause of the lack of affordability. Now, I sit here speaking to you from California, where the median home price as the recording of this video in December of 2025 is $900,000. That's a lot of cheddar right there. That's a big number. And less than 15% of Californians who don't already own a home can afford that median home price. Less than 15%. That is abysmal when it comes to affordability. So many Americans, and especially so many Californians, are feeling pretty much frozen out of the American dream right now. Now, the reason real estate prices have gotten exceptionally high has to do with supply and demand, basic supply and demand. Now, there's going to be people in comments that are going to blow me up and say, there's many reasons. It's more complicated than that. Yes, it is. But the biggest problem is a supply problem. We've had a real lack of building over the last several decades due to regulations and permitting and that sort of thing that really slows things down, slows housing starts down, and it slows them down long enough that then we get market corrections that spooks the builders and they slow down for market reasons. And so we've gotten really far behind when it comes to number of new units built versus number of new families formed in this country. And that has put us with a real lack of real estate supply. Okay, so how bad is this inventory problem? How short are we on housing units? It's a big number. According to some reporting by Goldman Sachs, we are 3 to 4 million units behind on where we need to be to have enough homes to meet the demand in the United States. Now, if you know anything about the building industry, you can't crank out 3 to 4 million new homes very quickly. This is a decades-long problem to solve here. It's not going to be solved overnight. Now, there's a couple of reasons for this. The first one being, like I said, regulations and things slowing things down, and then those slowdowns running up against market cycles that cause builders to get spooked. One of the other ones is just the availability of land to build on near thriving city centers, which has gone down from 70% in the 1960s to 40% today. So we just have a lack of greenfield in, places to build near the city centers where all the jobs are, which makes it hard as well. And quite frankly, if you enjoy the planet and clean air and that sort of thing, we don't want to be eating up all of our greenfield sites just to build homes for people, which requires more creative solutions like urban infill and building up, not out, and these sorts of things. Now, those solutions take even more time and have even more regulatory hurdles to get through. So this 3 to 4 million shortfall in terms of units is a big problem that's going to end up being our kids' problem to solve. It could take that long. Now, exacerbating that is what we've already been talking about, which is this delisting trend. So normally we have our 3 to 4 million shortfall in our new units that we're dealing with, and that forces a lot more buyers into the residential resale realm, which inflates the prices, not the prices, easy for me to say, inflates the prices and keeps pressure on the real estate market and keeps prices rising. Now that's gotten worse by the fact that we have all these sellers that have their 3% interest rates that they don't want to give up, and they have their pandemic era expectations of getting tip-top price for their homes, even though we are now in a declining market in most markets in the country, and they don't want to take less for their homes, and they don't have to because they've got that great interest rate, so they pull their listings from the market. So now, in addition to being behind on our new construction targets, we have an exceptionally low residential resale inventory, and that is keeping the pressure on prices. And this is the reason why, although people like me are telling you we're in a housing correction, prices are correcting. There is going to be downward pressure on prices. This is why, technically speaking, when you look at the numbers, they're not actually going down. Depending on the report you look at, we are seeing between 1.1 and 2.2% increase in home prices nationwide for the year of 2025. So you say to yourself, well, wait a second, Rich, you're saying that we're going into a correction, but prices are actually going up. What's going on? Well, what's going on is that although there are all the market mechanics present to say that we're going into a recession and that housing prices should correct, the inventory is so massively low that there remains even though it's softening quite a bit, a higher buyer demand than we have units to fill, and that keeps the prices going up. Every time we have all these people pull their listings from the market, the buyer pool that's actually shopping right now has less to choose from. They start to compete over those ones, and prices stay persistently and stickily high right now. Stickily, is that a word? If it's not, it is now. Prices are staying high, unfortunately, due to this trend. So even though the macroeconomic trends say we should be seeing price correction, we're not. But is that 1.2 to 2 point, or 1.1 to 2.2, depending on who you listen to, increase in home prices? Does that actually represent an increase? Does that actually represent building of real estate wealth for you? Let's get into that one. Now, here is the thing about looking at appreciation numbers. When people quote appreciation numbers for the real estate industry, they almost always are quoting nominal numbers, meaning numbers that are not inflation adjusted. They're saying just, hey, the price this year is up, as I say, let's go with the high number, 2.2%. Okay, that's a nominal number, but it's not accounting for inflation. Now, inflation is also staying very sticky and staying high. Right now, our CPI, our core inflation numbers, are at 3% just about. So we're saying, hey, prices have gone up on real estate. Your real estate has increased in value 2.2% over the year of 2025. Yay, you've gained value in your real estate. Well, hang on. Everything in my life costs 3% more than it did before. All of my cash in the bank just went down in value and purchasing power by 3% due to that inflation. So I actually have a net 0.8% loss there. So even though real estate prices have gone up 2.2%, because inflation's at 3%, your asset, you purchased an appreciating asset, you would like it to, at a bare minimum, break even, keep pace with inflation. Preferably, you'd like it to outpace inflation, so you're actually gaining real value there. And so when you're looking at people on the news saying, hey, it's not so bad, the real estate market hasn't actually started to crash yet, we've seen 2.2% appreciation. Hey, it's not excellent, but it's not bad, right? Well, actually, it does represent a net loss in value due to inflation. And so when we look at these numbers, that's how we can say, hey, we really are going into a recession. We really are going into a real estate correction right now. All the numbers show that you actually have lost value due to inflation on your real estate over the last 12 months, even though it looks on paper like you haven't. And that's why it's important to actually run the numbers and listen to people that are giving you a real picture. The dirty little secret in real estate is that over the several, 130 years that we've been keeping real data on this stuff, for the vast majority of them, real estate has only kept pace with inflation. There is this persistent sense that your home is your greatest investment. I have a whole video on that for you guys, and I do believe it is a really great investment, but not because of appreciation. For the most part, through real estate history, it's just about kept pace with inflation. Okay for an appreciating asset, meets the bare minimum, but not really what you're hoping for when you look at returns on the S&P 500 at 10% nominal and 6 to 7% inflation adjusted. That's doing much better over the 250 years we have data on that. It's really been the last 20 or so years that real estate has actually been killing it when it comes to appreciation. So most of the benefit comes to paying down that mortgage and the forced savings and all of that comes with real estate and getting to live in the asset while it does work for you as well. Again, that's too much for this video. I have a whole video on that, but suffice it to say, right now, real estate values actually are going down on an inflation adjusted basis. And that is a metric that you, as a consumer in the marketplace and as an American with a dog in this fight in the economy, should be taking note of. Okay, that is a lot of information, a lot to process and a lot to take in. And it feels like a lot of it is kind of contradicting each other. And there's a lot of push-pull there. If you got that sense, then right on, you're getting it. Because the real estate market today really isn't taking wild swings one way or the other. It's really in stasis. It's really stuck for the most part. So how do you make sense of this? How do we take all this information and land this plane? Well, if you're a seller right now, you need to adjust your expectations. You can't be coming to the marketplace expecting those multiple offers and crazy high prices. That's just not realistic. And if you don't have a strong motivation to sell, don't put yourself, the realtor, your community, the other buyers through all that mess. Don't list to begin with. Don't list your home unless you're ready to be realistic about the market you are facing. You are going to, have to probably accept less than you were expecting, quite possibly expect less than your listing price. Right now, the nationwide average sales to list is about 98%, meaning most buyers are getting a 2% concession on average from sellers. So sellers are having to come down at least 2% on their price to affect a sale. That's important information for you to have going into this whole thing. And if you're not comfortable with all of that and you're like, if I have to do that, I'll just sit on it because of my 3% interest rate, then don't bother listing to begin with, because these are the realities of the market that you're facing. And as a buyer, you have to know that although there are deals to be had, and over the last 12 months, my clients have been much more successful than they were in 2020, 2021, and the first half of 2022 at getting some good bargains and getting prices down on the sales, getting prices down on the homes and getting concessions from the sellers and getting repairs made and that sort of thing. There aren't wild, incredible deals to be had because the inventory is staying persistently small, persistently contracted. We just don't have enough units for sale to meet the existing demand. So there aren't wild deals to be had. So here we have sellers that don't want to budge and buyers that want to swing for the fences and get big concessions. And the sellers have these great interest rates so they can just take their ball and go home if they don't get what they want. And that's why we're stuck as a real estate market. So if anybody's telling you there's big swings happening, they're doing that for salacious reasons, for clicks and likes and to get your eyeballs on their content. That's not really happening right now. And if anybody is pretending that we're not sliding into a real estate correction and recession because, hey, we went up 2.2%, they're also being disingenuous about the numbers because due to inflation, we're still losing value. So this is really a market where you have to manage your expectations. As a buyer, should you expect to get some concessions from a seller? Absolutely. Should you expect to be able to come in below list price? Absolutely. Should you expect to be able to come in 10, 15, 20% below list price? No. And as a seller, should you expect to be able to come to market 10% over market value and get even more than that and not have to budge at all on inspections or inspection findings? No, not at all. And what's the solution to all of this? The solution is to somehow increase supply. And if you're watching Washington right now, you'll see they keep throwing out ideas that would increase demand. Terrible ideas like the 50-year mortgage. Decent ideas like portable mortgages, but still will increase demand side and really not increase supply side at all. Throwing out the credit score requirement for loans, which will help nearly nobody in the marketplace. The truth is, a supply side problem is hard to solve and takes a lot of time, a lot of years, and some really creative solutions to how are we going to get more units without eating up more greenfield? How are we going to streamline things so we still maintain our important environmental regulations, but builders can build in a way that they still can earn money and in a way that they can still get things done in a timely manner? These are big problems that we can't solve quickly and overnight. So these dynamics are likely to persist, and that means in the marketplace, unfortunately, we as buyers and sellers have to adjust our expectations because there's probably not a lot of solutions coming that are going to change this very quickly. And if it does, if we do get a massive drop in real estate prices and an increase in affordability, that's probably for not great reasons. That's probably because we've dropped into a really big recession. A lot of people are hurting and a lot of people are losing their jobs. And so even though there's great deals to be had, it's only the secure and wealthy that get to take advantage of those deals because the working class, again, are facing job loss and can't do that anyway, can't take advantage of those deals. So be careful what you wish for. Correction is going to be good for us. Crash, not so much. So this wraps up our discussion of the delisting trend, the reasons it's happening, what's causing it, what is the effect on the marketplace, and goes over more broadly what's happening in the real estate market. Why is it stuck? And are you really gaining value? And why the numbers you're seeing on the news, if you feel like they don't make sense, that's because they don't, because they're presenting them in a disingenuous way. I hope this has helped you wrap your mind around the marketplace so that you can make a better, more informed decision for your family in 2025 and 2026 when it comes to real estate. As always, that's our goal with this channel. Now, if you want to dig a little deeper and see why some of these ideas coming out of Washington are a bad idea, you can watch this video right here on why the 50-year mortgage is a terrible idea. You can watch this video right here on why portable mortgages will help some, but not many. But if you want a real estate education that will really change your life and tell you what you need to do to be successful in any real estate market, click this video right down here for our 5 real estate fundamentals. And of course, hit the subscribe button there. As always, thanks for making it to the end with me. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.